What's going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle that would be at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. A little bit different than what the normal recap edition is. Usually we go back, take a look at some action from the weekend prior, give you all the nuts and bolts as far as the winner, the connections, X, Y, and Z, speed figures, that sort of thing. This time around, since this is the week of the Kentucky Derby, we will be going back and looking at all of the Kentucky Derby 100-point preps. We'll go into those in depth, and then as far as the stakes montage, which we normally do when we're a little bit overrun and we can't dive into all the races, this week that stakes montage will be all the 50-point Derby preps leading into it. So you'll get the stretch runs of basically the vast majority of the most important preps and the more recent prep races. We'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into the 100-point preps. If you want the entire replays of all of these races, you can find them in the race recaps over on drf.com. All of our writers, they go through, they write all the recaps. You can also go in, I believe, to the Derby Watch sort of area, and you can find all of the full replays of these races as well. But as far as this show is concerned, we'll give you the stretch run. We'll dive into the charts a little bit, the PPs, talk about some observations coming out of those races now that everything is certainly done, and then we'll get you ready. Hopefully this can be a little bit of a cheat guide for you getting ready for the first Saturday in May, which at this point, this is being recorded on Monday afternoon, April the 30th. Guess what? That's going to be just a few days away here. First Saturday in May, Cinco de Mayo. If you've been listening to this thing podcast form, you have YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, plenty of ways for you to find this program. Before we dive into all the recaps, let's first show you the 20 horses that have a spot in the starting gate for the first Saturday in May, the Run for the Roses, the Kentucky Derby. These are the top 20 horses as far as points are concerned. There are a couple horses that look like they're going to be entered as far as also eligibles are concerned. Something would need to happen between now and Saturday, or I believe Friday morning is actually the cutoff date for the AEs to draw into the race. So I'm only showing you the top 20. You can go and find the other two. I believe it is Blended Citizen as well as one other horse, but it's slipping my mind a little bit at the moment. You can see the top 20 right there, and this is in point order. This is not in post position, because by the time some of you listen to this, if you listen to it live, the post positions for the race will actually have been drawn, and it won't look like this. But this is the top 20 as far as things shake down. You can see Magnum Moon did nothing wrong, and that's usually been a very, very positive sign, these sort of high point total scorer. Ever since this point system has been implemented, has been kind of boss as far as these Kentucky Derby races have been over the past 5 years. So Magnum Moon is sitting in a very good spot if you believe sort of trends and projections going forward. You see Good Magic, he's rebounded nicely after a little bit of a stutter step to the beginning of his 2018 campaign, but we'll talk about him more as far as the Bluegrass Stakes is concerned. You see more Pletcher runners, a number of them right in the top there. You go on through and you see Bolt Doro's name. You see Justify, who's going to be the favorite for the Kentucky Derby on Saturday afternoon. You see Mendelssohn coming over from Europe for Aidan O'Brien. And then you get farther down the list, you have some horses that maybe are a little bit more intriguing as far as underneath horses are concerned for superfectas, trifectas, things of those nature. And we know that the superfecta is the wager. If you're ever going to take a shot at an individual race wager, it's probably Derby Day, and it's probably the superfecta, because there's a real scenario where you're looking at just a giant payoff, and that could set you up not only for the year, but even in some scenarios for a lifetime. So I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind if you're looking to play wagers or you're looking for suggestions. Everyone and their brother points to the superfecta for good reason. Usually ends up having a very, very giant sort of payoff. So something to keep in mind. But here are the 20 horses. Again, these are names that we're all familiar with at this point. And that's why this show, we're not going to be breaking any sort of news, but it's just going to be some observations and kind of putting all of these things all in one spot for you to be able to find it and hopefully crank it out in about 35, 45 minutes. So there are the top 20 horses. We'll find out. It sounds like everything is all systems go for all 20 of them, so we'll find out. The race will be drawn Tuesday morning, and you'll have, I believe, 2 also eligibles, and they will have until Friday morning to draw into the body of the race. So without further ado, let's go back. Again, we're only going to go over the 100-point preps in depth, and we'll go in reverse. We'll go in chronological order, I should say. Starting off with the first 100-point prep that we had, let's go back to the Louisiana Derby. First of the 100-point preps that we'll take a look back at was the Louisiana Derby. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the stretch run to show you for reasons I'm sure many of you are aware of, or you can take an educated guess. But we all know the result here. The top three finishers all look to be running in the Kentucky Derby. Your winner was Noble Indy going out for Todd Pletcher. This is a very lightly raced horse, and he's done some good things in a short amount of time. The fascinating thing about this race was you can go through and look at the way the race ran and the way the flow of the race was sort of constructed, especially when you look at it using the Timeform US pace figures. There was a fast early pace signed on because you had just an absolute runaway 100-to-1 shot that really had no chance to win the race, but that could have easily compromised a horse like Noble Indy, who was the one closest in attendance. First-time blinkers. The first-time blinkers was a concern for me because Pletcher historically does not do well first-time blinkers in a graded stakes race, so I was already a little bit turned off by Noble Indy. He comes into this spot, sits off of that hot pace, and when you go through and look, and I'm going to keep looking over this direction, so don't mind me, but because I've got my other monitor up here, when you look at the overall chart, and you look at Noble Indy at the quarter, the half, and three-quarters, he was second by a half length, second by a length, and he was in the lead by 2 lengths. Okay, you look at the second and third place finishers. Lone Sailor was 9th, 7th, and 6th, and you look at My Boy Jack, he was 10th, 10th, and 10th. So clearly this had a bit of a closer's flow to this race, and the fact that Noble Indy was able to get the job done, that just speaks volumes for the effort that he put forward in this spot. I think it's also interesting to note the way that the sort of stretch run was run, where when they hit the top of the lane, Noble Indy doesn't just lose first place, he loses second place. He falls back into third at one point at about the 8th pole. And it's fascinating because you don't usually see lightly raced horses do that kind of thing and be able to re-rally and come back. He had a lengthened change put on him back to from first to third. Lone Sailor looked like he was home free. I've seen people discuss the idea of him hanging, Lone Sailor. How can you hang if you go by someone? To me, the notion of hanging is you get there, you have all the momentum, and you don't go by them. This horse put a length on Noble Indy, more than a length, and he put some distance between he and My Boy Jack. If he had hung, he would have never gone by anyone. That's why we say hanging like a chandelier, because you don't actually go by anyone. You just get there and you stop. I don't believe Lone Sailor hung. I think Noble Indy idled. Kind of going to my sort of justification for that, when you go into Formulator and you pull up the incremental pace, you can look and see how each sort of fraction was run as far as time is concerned. For Noble Indy, his first three quarters, 23:14, 23:64, 24:69. Lone Sailor, 23:96, 23:50, 24:71. And My Boy Jack, 24:55, 24:10, 24:64. The fourth quarter is the important one to keep an eye on. Noble Indy went 26:01. Lone Sailor, 25:12. My Boy Jack, 24:17. 24:17. Just looking at that, you would get the impression that Noble Indy was tiring in that fourth quarter, because he was up pushing that hot pace, and clearly the rest of the pace disintegrated. And conversely, Lone Sailor and My Boy Jack, they were getting the engines cooking because they were coming from a little bit farther off of it. Now, if that was the case, that final eighth of a mile, you would just see those numbers continue to trend that direction. Where, okay, maybe Lone Sailor and My Boy Jack don't finish quite as quickly as they had been, but they're still going to finish a heck of a lot faster than Noble Indy. Instead, the complete opposite happens. Lone Sailor slows down to 13:03. My Boy Jack slows down to 12:95, and Noble Indy actually picks it back up again and goes to 12:80. To me, this was everything that John Velasquez said in the post-race interview, that this horse is still a little bit green, and he needed a reminder, and he kind of pulled himself up. More and more I go back and watch this race and watch this replay, I'm more intrigued by the effort from Noble Indy, and even coming forward here to Saturday afternoon, it looks like he's been training well down at Churchill Downs, so the racetrack's not a problem. I have a weird feeling. I don't know that I'm going to pick him, and luckily I get about, this is being recorded about 1 or 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. I got about 24 hours to figure out what I'm going to do as far as picks are concerned. Noble Indy, I don't think is totally out of the question to win this race. I think he is very clearly the fourth of the 4 Pletcher horses that people are paying attention to, but I think there could be a scenario where he actually is one of the more likely Pletcher entrants, counting him because he went through the fairgrounds, and historically the fairgrounds has not been a positive or a major sort of, it's not been a major circuit that has had implications in the Kentucky Derby. I wonder if this year is different. It's also something to keep in the back of your mind. You take a look, you've had some big workouts from a horse like Lone Sailor. He came back 2 works back at Churchill Downs, and he blazed in like 57-3. That's an enormous workout. And then he came back, and it looks like he's just been training very, very well, comfortable over the racing surface. And my boy Jack, all he did was come back to win the Lexington, which we'll dive into that race. That'll be part of the stakes montage later on. It flatters the form a little bit of this race, and I really, truly believe, maybe I'm wrong, we'll find out Saturday. I kind of feel like Noble Indy is the sort of horse that I don't know that he's a likely win contender, one of the likelier ones, but I also I think he's going to outrun his odds. I'll leave it at that. I think he's going to go off in that 20-1 range, and I think he's going to run a little bit better than I think many people would expect him to. Noble Indy is a horse that I'm very interested in. Again, not going to commit to picking him or using him somewhere, but I'm going to have him in wagers. There's no question about it. As far as picks are concerned, we'll find out. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I think this is a much better race than some people may think it is, just looking at it at face value and looking at paper. Very, very interesting effort from Noble Indy, and even the second and third place finishers, Lone Sailor and my boy Jack. I think the Louisiana Derby this year, and I think Louisiana as a whole this year, usually gets a bad rap. I think there were some decent horses down there at the fairgrounds this year. We'll find out how they run first Saturday in May, just coming up in a few days at Churchill Downs. From the Louisiana Derby to the Florida Derby, from one Todd Pletcher winner to another, here's the stretch run of the 2018 Florida Derby.
At the top of the stretch, Audible let loose on the outside to take the lead from Mississippi, who's back to second. Hoffberg straightens up and tries to finish up with less than an eighth of a mile to go. It's the Holy Bull winner, Audible, who's clear. Audible by 3. Hoffberg can't get him. Mississippi is third. 5 Florida Derbies for Todd Pletcher. Audible, no doubt about it. He won it by 2.
Audible, very impressive. Not a lot to knock about him. Undefeated as far as 3-year-old form is concerned. A couple of 99 Beyer speed figures. Usually I like to see that, pairing up tops, possibly moving on to a new top in that third start. I think there's a lot to like here. I've sort of warmed up to this horse a little bit early on. I didn't love his first start as a 3-year-old. Did everything mechanically wrong and backwards. Comes back, and I don't really have any knocks about this effort. He got a little bit outrun going on to the backside, but then he quickly came right back into it, and he thought he finished very, very well. When you look at it incrementally, he came home in 12:52, excuse me, and the runner-up Hoffberg came home in 12:69, so he finished considerably faster than Hoffberg did. It needs to be stated that the top two had absolutely dream setups as far as the pace is concerned. If you think that's going to happen again on Saturday, then you know what? No reason not to go along with these horses. If you think that things are going to be a little bit different and perhaps they're going to have to overcome a little bit as far as adversity is concerned and trip, then maybe you want to take us a little bit of a stand against them. Audible, I've warmed up to him a little bit. I really think the dangerous thing for me with Audible is he feels like he could be the kind of horse that is a winner or he's nowhere. And those are very, very dangerous horses as far as constructing wagering is concerned, putting wagers together, whether it's exactas, or trifectas, or superfectas, or even, for that matter, multi-race bets. I think Audible is one of the horses that you really need to seriously make a decision on. Do you believe him or do you not believe in him? Pedigree-wise, I know a lot of people don't like the into mischief piece there. I think he's a legitimate win threat in here. I also think Hoffberg is a legitimate win threat in here. And Hoffberg continues to be, everyone has talked about over the past handful of years, there's been 1 or 2 horses leading up to the race that have the sort of standout works. We'll find out. I don't think there are any more serious works to come. I think there's just going to be some galloping and some jogging and whatnot. Hoffberg's most recent workout, if you haven't seen it, it looks beautiful. This looks like a horse that continues to move on. Bill Mott has said it seems like he has thrived with more racing, considering he's only started twice as a 3-year-old, 3 times in his entire career. I don't know that he's going to be the 20-1 that he probably should be. I think he might be in that 12 to 15-1 range, but guess what? 12 to 15-1 is nothing to sneeze at if you think he's a legitimate win threat. I do. I think his pedigree is fantastic, and I think the sky is the limit for this horse. I think he can win Saturday afternoon, and I also think there's a real part of me that wants to say if I had to take any one of these 20 horses that's going to run on Saturday going forward, and not just for the Triple Crown, but if I had to buy stock in a horse going forward, it would pretty certainly be Hoffberg. Maybe Mendelssohn has something to say about that, just based on his overall body of work and his pedigree and what he's done. But But Hofberg, from a pedigree standpoint, from the connections that he's with, what he's done in such a short amount of time, knowing that these connections very rarely do this kind of thing, and they only do it when they think they got something, I think Hofberg is a very, very intriguing candidate Saturday afternoon in the Kentucky Derby, as well as going forward. He could be a monster, I think, as he continues to develop and continues to mature. One more thing to just go back with Audible. His gallop out was pretty gross. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. It was not an impressive piece, but at the same time, it sounds like this is something that has just kind of been his MO. And when you go and you watch some of the tape of his workouts, he's not the sexiest thing to watch work out in the morning either. But again, that seems to be his MO. Like he's just kind of, I'll work when I have to work. I'll go out and play when I have to play. And, if you're familiar with any of the 30 for 30 films that ESPN has done, you just go back to You Don't Know Bo and Bo Jackson. Apparently, he just despised practicing. And he said, I don't need to do this. I know what I can do come game day. Well, maybe Audible is like that. Audible didn't, I don't need to work out with an overmatched horse. Stop. Get him away from me. I know what I can do on Saturday afternoons. Audible, I think, is a legitimate threat. I think Hofberg is a legitimate threat. The Florida Derby has been the key the past 5 years going into Louisville. It has been the most successful 100-point prep going into the Kentucky Derby. Wouldn't surprise me at all if, again, that's the same thing coming this year. Two other horses to just briefly touch on, one for the Derby and one for a race on the undercard Saturday afternoon. For the Derby, promises fulfilled. Don't think he's a legitimate threat. Don't like the way that he's looked as far as workouts are concerned this week. But let's be fair. You have to just draw a line through this race in the Florida Derby because the pace was insane and he was hooked in that duel. They went sub-22 for the opening quarter. He had no chance. Draw a line through that. Having said that, I don't like him here in this spot. And one other horse that maybe you want to keep an eye on, again, go on over to video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel and click that subscribe button if you're over on YouTube. Mississippi ran very well in this race, I think, in the Florida Derby, and it looks like he'll be running the Pat Day Mile, which I think is perfect for him, a one-turn mile. He was one of the first ones to make a move into this hot pace, and he stuck around pretty gamely, all things considered. It may not have been the best finish from him. He finished in 13:92, but considering how close he was and how fast he went early, I think this was a very, very good effort. I think he's one that you're going to want to have to keep an eye on Saturday afternoon. If you're not going to pick him, perhaps you should at least consider using him in multi-race wagers or anything else that you're playing as far as the Pat Day Mile is concerned. But the Florida Derby, again, looks like it could be a very, very productive one that first Saturday in May. One of the races that historically has not been that important as far as the Kentucky Derby is concerned is the UAE Derby over in Meydan. And normally you get horses coming from Godolphin or you get horses coming from the Aidan O'Brien camp, and they're turf horses, but they're just good enough that they're better than everybody else that they'll run against over on the dirt, and then they'll come over here and they're just hopeless long shots. Perhaps this horse ends up being hopeless on Saturday afternoon, but he's not going to be a long shot. He might be the second choice in the race. We're talking about Mendelssohn. Here's the stretch run of his electric performance in this year's UAE Derby.
Gold Town flat to the floorboards down the outside, followed by Yulong Warrior, Taiki further, Ruggiero, but it is Mendelssohn well clear inside the final 250. It's going to make a one-act affair of the UAE Derby. Mendelssohn en route perhaps to the Kentucky Derby is going to absolutely jog up. Mendelssohn's out by 15 on Raya, battling on Rewrite, followed by Gold Town, but what a win by Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn by a conservative 17 lengths.
If you believe the Buyer speed figures that they released for the Dubai World Cup night, Mendelssohn earned a 106. If you believe the Timeform US ratings, I believe he was up in the 128 range, which both of those make him arguably one of the fastest horses in the entire crop as far as these 3-year-olds are concerned. It has to be acknowledged what everybody and their brother has talked about, that he took advantage of a speed-friendly racetrack at Meydan that night. Anyone that won on the front end, you need to take down a couple notches because they had everything go their way. Having said that, there is still that piece where I look at it and say, the racetrack certainly helped him, but it did not cause him to win by 18. Do you follow me? That maybe I'm wording that incorrectly or improperly. He won. Maybe the length of margin was as big as it was because of the racetrack, but he was going to win by open lengths by 10 lengths anyway. So maybe it was an extra 5 lengths or 6 lengths or 8 lengths or whatever it may have been. But he was going to blow the doors off that field no matter what, based on the way he ran. Nobody else was going to be able to run with him. I think it was a legitimate effort. Maybe it wasn't quite as good as it looked that day. Maybe he's not quite that good. But I happen to think he is a bit of an uncommon talent because he has won his last 3 races in 3 different countries. He's won on synthetic, he's won on dirt, he's won on turf. He's won a graded stakes race on dirt in Dubai. He's won a graded stakes race on turf in the United States. And I think that is one of the most important pieces that people, not that they haven't talked about it, but that they haven't considered with a horse like this. Is sure, the UAE horses that normally win the Derby and come over and run in the Kentucky Derby, they usually don't change leads. They've usually only run on dirt over at Meydan. Can be a little bit of a sort of surface. And realistically, they're probably better off on turf. That doesn't seem to be the case with this horse. And if you want to say Aidan O'Brien's overall body of work suggests that this is not a positive move for him on dirt, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with it, but keep in mind, the only thing I would just throw in, most of the horses he runs on dirt over here are not dirt horses. This may be the exception to that rule. We know the pedigree. He's a half to Beholder. He's a half to Into Mischief. He's by Scat Daddy. He is dirt through and through. I just think very rarely do you get instances like this where the horses can run on broken glass. And they're still going to be very, very good. And I also think it's important that he doesn't have to have the lead. Now, maybe the kickback is going to be the end of him, of Mendelssohn. Maybe getting him behind horses with dirt kicked in his face, he's going to totally resent that, throw a fit, and not going to want to go on with it. But I like that he has sat off of a target before, and he's not totally headstrong and wanting to go on with it. His game was elevated as a 2-year-old the minute they put blinkers on him. Ever since then, he's been a totally different animal. He's still a little bit of a baby. You hear O'Brien talk about that. You can hear him squealing left and right when he's out there, whether he's in the paddock or he's getting ready to go. So he's still a little bit on the immature side. Now, how's he going to deal with 175,000 people? We'll find out. How's he going to deal with the ship over? We'll find out, but based on what he's done in the past shipping-wise, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think Mendelssohn is, for me, he's on the short list of horses that I will consider picking for this race. I think he is an uncommon talent. He changes leads on cue. He does things that horses over there generally don't do, and I think it's because he's just a bit of an uncommon talent for Aidan O'Brien. We'll find out if it's uncommon enough to win a race like the Kentucky Derby. One other horse to mention coming out of that race, I know this is the Derby prep sort of recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show, but Rhea will be running in the Kentucky Oaks on Friday, and we will have an Oaks preview show for the Matt Bernier Show. It'll be kind of the combination, the Oaks Derby preview edition. She never changed leads. Now, she's changed leads in her workouts with Bob Baffert. She's had 2 breezes with Baffert, but it's still something to keep in the back of your mind. When they are not trained to do it, old habits die hard, and if push comes to shove and they get into a battle deep in the stretch, is she going to change leads or is she going to hang on her left lead, and could that potentially cost her a race like the Kentucky Oaks on Friday afternoon if you think she is good enough? We'll find out. One thing is for certain, a horse that's going to take a ton of money on Saturday afternoon is Mendelssohn. Whether you're a believer or not, that's up to you, but boy, his win in the UAE Derby, very, very impressive. The biggest Saturday of the entire prep season was April the 7th. The first Saturday in April, you had 3 100-point Derby preps. Let's start off up in New York, Ozone Park, Aqueduct, a mile and an eighth, the Wood Memorial. You had a couple of ways that you could possibly go in here, and really it was a matter of could Enticed get out to that mile and an eighth distance successfully? Would Vino Rosso be able to finally put it together? Would some horse like Restoring Hope coming in from California for Bob Baffert be able to finally prove that he belongs here, considering Baffert has long talked about him as a legitimate Derby kind of horse? Well, ultimately, Vino Rosso was the one that won out. Here's Larry Colmus with the stretch run of the Wood Memorial.
Stretch, Enticed, and Vino Rosso turn for home together in the Wood Memorial. It is Vino Rosso in front. Enticed battles him on the inside, and he's coming back with a furlong to run. Oh, what a wood this is. It is Vino Rosso in front. Enticed continues to battle him, but Vino Rosso's getting away. Restoring Hope is third. Vino Rosso, Fantastico, in the Wood Memorial. He won it by 3 over Enticed.
Vino Rosso is an interesting candidate on Saturday afternoon in the Kentucky Derby for a couple of reasons. Distance-wise, Pletcher and company have always said that this horse, he feels like he wants to go all day. I couldn't agree more. It looks like he wants to run a mile and a half if you give it to him. Keep that in mind. You never know. There's another race coming up 6 weeks after the Kentucky Derby. Perhaps that's a spot for him in the Belmont Stakes, if not Saturday. But I think he's got a puncher's chance on Saturday. The interesting thing about him, and this is the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about with Vino Rosso. I've liked him for some time. He has ability. There's nobody that I don't think anybody's going to deny that. John Velasquez has worked this horse in the mornings. He has gone with him to Tampa Bay Downs for an allowance race prior to his graded stakes sort of debut. So clearly, they think that there's something here. I don't think he runs well on the turns. And the two races, the stakes races at Tampa are evidence of that, where it looked like he was ready to roll, and on the far turn, it was just like he was spinning his wheels. There was nothing going on there. Then you get him back into the straightaways, and he runs well. You get to the Wood Memorial, and he gets onto the far turn, and sure, he's starting to make up ground, but that's because Old Time Revival set just an unbelievable pace on the front end, and he was backing up in a bad way. But Velasquez has to hit him on the shoulder, Vino Rosso, to keep him going, and I just wonder, perhaps this was the race that, bang, the light bulb went on. Or maybe it's still not fully on yet. It's flickering a little bit. He's figuring this thing out, but I don't know that I want to find out Saturday afternoon with a number of other horses that on the far turn, he's still, oh, is this what we're doing here? And you know what? He's going to come with a beautiful stretch run, and it'll be just enough to run fourth. Even more reason that it makes me wonder if ultimately Belmont Park is going to be his ultimate sort of landing ground in a race like the Belmont Stakes, where those wide sweeping turns, it's not going to be a matter of him spinning his wheels on those turns because they're not so pronounced. And then you obviously have just the additional distance. I'm not saying he can't win on Saturday. I'm going to use him in wagers. I don't think, I won't be stunned if he wins the race, but I'll be mildly surprised if Vino Rosso wins the race. I think he is a legitimate candidate underneath, but mentally, I don't know if he's entirely there just yet. As far as Enticed is concerned, Enticed has something to his name on Saturday that a number of his contemporaries can't say, and that's a victory over the Churchill Downs main track. My bigger concern with a horse like this, and I've said it in all of these races, that were all these recaps that we've done and previews, and anytime we've talked about any of these horses, Enticed, I think he is much more his mom than his dad. Now, his dad wasn't much going past a mile and an eighth. Medaglia d'Oro, that's what his bread and butter was. You get him out to a mile and a quarter, a different horse. It's tricky, even shorter distances. You get her out to a mile and an eighth, she started to feel it. You keep her at that flat mile, she's a monster. I think he's going to be a one-turn kind of horse. I think he's a very, very talented runner. I'll be mildly surprised if he is around at the end. I'll be shocked if he wins the race. And he's just the kind of horse that if he wins, I will lose everything. I won't have him. I may have him at the very, very bottom of exotic wagers, but I won't have him in any picks or anything like that. I think Entice is very talented. I just don't think a mile and a quarter is his friend. Last horse that at least has some sort of say on Saturday afternoon, I suppose, because he's running in the race, is Firenze Fire. He's running in the Kentucky Derby. I've long said he should be running the Pat Day Mile. I think he's going to be a nice one-turn kind of horse, 7/8 of a mile, one-turn mile, whatever it may be, mile and a quarter. As these distances get longer, I think he just gets worse and worse for a horse like Firenze Fire. Vino Rosso, though, he's very interesting. He continues. He's on that upward trajectory, and if you don't agree with me, if you think otherwise, that it's all there and now he's ready to go, then you know what? You're looking at a very, very juicy price on high-profile connections, and he could be ready to run the race of his life. I think he may run the race of his life. That little issue, it keeps nagging at me. He doesn't run well on the turns. Maybe he'll put it all together on Saturday afternoon in the Kentucky Derby. If he does, great. If not, Belmont Park 6 weeks from Saturday. I think he's got a big shot in the Belmont Stakes. Well, the stage was set in Lexington on April the 7th for the 2-year-old champion to prove that he still had it, and he was still one of the main contenders for the Kentucky Derby. Good Magic's seasonal debut, far from what anybody had anticipated. A very, very dull effort down at Gulfstream Park. Takes a little bit of time, comes back in the Bluegrass, and he gets the job done. Kurt Becker with the stretch run of the 2018 Bluegrass.
Sporting Chances third. Free Drop Billy fourth is still 5 lengths away. And Good Magic has taken the lead from Flame Away, coming toward the final furlong. Gap of 3, Sporting Chance in third. Free Drop Billy fighting on but fourth. Good Magic with the lead. Flame Away giving everything he's got but second. Sporting Chance third. Free Drop Billy in fourth. Blended Citizen fifth. Good Magic to the front of the field in the Toyota Bluegrass to win it for Chad Brown and Jose Ortiz in 1 minute 36.
Okay, first things first. I've been a little bit of a doubter of Good Magic here in 2018, and I still am a slight skeptic of his coming out of the Bluegrass. But it was at least nice to know that he still had a little bit of fight in him, and he could still get the job done. Now, the reason I'm still a little bit of a skeptic. I hated that he popped back to his left lead late in the race. Again, roll your eyes, whomever you are, if you don't believe in it. Fast forward. I don't like seeing that. That's usually not a good thing. I've heard people talk about how it's possibly over because of tire tracks, as far as the gate is concerned. That's what caused him to pop. I've watched the replay 15 times. I can't see it. Maybe it was there, but I'm still dubious of that. To me, that's still too much of a crutch. Now, on the flip side of things, he was very, very wide, and that's a very, very positive effort from him, if you believe that. I know some people are of the opinion that the inside was a little bit better than other places on Bluegrass Saturday at Keeneland. I don't know if I'm entirely in that camp, but I can understand anybody that wants to make that case. And if you believe that, then Good Magic moves up even further. If you use some other figures out there, some other products that are available that incorporate ground loss, then yes, this was an impressive effort from Good Magic. I just have a hard time looking at it saying you beat Flame Away, who I like Flame Away. He's really come on to me. I like him a lot. But I don't think of him as a Kentucky Derby contender, as a win contender. I think of him as a very, very hard-hitting, hard-trying horse that he's going to give you what he's got. And I don't think it's good enough to win the Kentucky Derby. Is the ground loss and only a length and a quarter victory for Good Magic enough to potentially have him ready to go for this race? Sure it is. He's in great hands with Chad Brown. He's in arguably the best hands with Chad Brown. But there's still something to the idea that I don't know that he's necessarily as good as he was winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and I don't necessarily know that that's how good he actually is. Maybe I will be eating a big old heap and pile of humble pie on Monday when we recap and we tape the recap edition from this upcoming weekend. But there's just a part of me that says, I don't know if he's as good as the best of the best in here. Having said that, he's worked very, very well at Churchill Downs, and everyone says he is a picture out on the racetrack. Ears are up. His most recent work, he looked tremendous. I don't know if he's moved forward from age 2 to age 3. We'll find out. Maybe Saturday's the day. Maybe this has been the plan all along. Slowly bring him along and have him ready to peak the first Saturday in May. At the end of the day, this is the only race that matters for a horse like Good Magic. He's already a 2-year-old champion. You want the Kentucky Derby. We'll find out. I don't know. I'm not picking him. We'll put that out there. I'm not going to pick Good Magic. I may use him underneath. I'll use him in exotics. I may use him as far as a multi-race wager is concerned. But there's too much for me that I haven't loved about this horse coming back here as a 3-year-old. The combination of his return effort, and then I didn't love the Bluegrass. It was a good race, but I don't think it was exceptional. I'll just be against him as far as a win contender is concerned. As far as a pick, I should say. Again, I will use him in wagers defensively, but he's not one that I'm going to be having a ton of eggs in his basket. Mentioned Flame Away. I like him. I think he's a cool little horse. I think Mark Cassidy's done a very, very good job with him. It'll be interesting to see what we get from him. I could see him easily working out some sort of a Shackelford sort of effort here, where he gets out there and he is brave and he fights tooth and nail. Similar to Battle of Midway last year. He's going to be forward and he's going to stay on. He's going to fight you, and he's going to I think he's going to outrun his odds no matter what, no matter how you look at it. I think he's a very, very nice little horse. I think this is probably pushing it distance-wise, but at the end of the day, he could certainly factor in as far as a try or a super is concerned at a big, big number. Free Drop Billy, I had high hopes for him. I really did as a 3-year-old, and I'm starting to lose the faith in him. I'm wondering if he's just kind of a clunker. Now, a clunker can be very, very valuable on Saturday afternoon, because that's the kind of horse in Superfecta that if he runs fourth, he is more likely to run fourth than some of these other horses are to run second, third, or whatever else it may be. He could be the kind of horse that could be an underneath key. I'm starting to wonder if he's actually as good as I thought he could be. And he doesn't. You know what the good news is? He doesn't have to be a superstar to run well in the Kentucky Derby. Maybe there will be races for him going forward. Something to keep in the back of your mind for Free Drop Billy. He is by Union Rags, who has been an absolutely horrific turf sire, but the bottom half of this horse's pedigree is all turf, and it's long distance on turf. We've talked about it quite a bit. He's a half-brother to Hawkbill. Hawkbill won the big race over in Dubai earlier this year, and he has been well known for running well in mile-and-a-half races, longer distance races. So perhaps at some point Free Drop Billy is on the turf. I'm still very, very curious. I mean, Union Rags has been god-awful on turf, but neither here nor there. Free Drop Billy, to me, is a bit of a clunk-up special. Could be one to use underneath as far as exotics are concerned. And another horse to briefly touch on would be Blended Citizen. Blended Citizen is one of the horses on the outside looking in. Should he get in, I think he could be a player underneath, because I like the way that he finished here in the Bluegrass, and this at least made me feel a little bit better about him as far as his dirt propositions are concerned, because his dirt form as a 2-year-old was god-awful. And then all of a sudden they moved him over to the turf and the synthetic, and he really has done very, very well this year. He's had a really good 3-year-old campaign, and I think the connections have done a very good job with him. And if he gets into this race, I don't think distance is a problem. And you know what? He ran well enough at the end of this race in the Bluegrass. We're going to take a look real quick, incrementally. What do I have for him? He came home in 12:74. That was very, very easily the fastest come-home time in the entire race. So he's the kind of horse that if he gets in, I would certainly be using him underneath. I don't think he can win the race, but I think he's one to consider using as far as underneath in a tri or a super is concerned. But the main players coming out of the Bluegrass, Good Magic, Flame Away, Free Drop Billy. Most of those eyes are going to be on Good Magic. We'll find out if the 2-year-old champion can come back and win the biggest race of them all for 3-year-olds Saturday afternoon. Now the one that I'm sure you've all been waiting for, the Santa Anita Derby. Happen to have two of the more highly regarded 3-year-olds facing off, one of them being Bolt Doro, a horse that was a Grade 1 winner as a 2-year-old, and in his first start as a 3-year-old really put down an absolute war with McKenzie, and whether he deserved to be awarded or not, he was awarded first place via disqualification in that spot in the San Felipe. And then you have Justify, who at this point in the game is the bee's knees. He's done nothing wrong in any of his lifetime starts. He's a perfect 3 for 3 now after the victory in the Santa Anita Derby. And you know what? Before we go on any farther, let's take a look at the stretch run of this year's Santa Anita Derby.
Justify reaching the top of the stretch. Back in third is Core Beliefs, then Instilled Regard, Pepe Tonio. Justify leading past the 8th pole. He's a couple of lengths in front. Bolt Doro is closing on the inside. It's Justify by 3/4 of a length. Bolt Doro trying ever so hard, but Justify, another exhilarating exhibition by the supremely gifted athlete. He's on a dizzying...
He's a perfect 3 for 3. He has 3 Beyer speed figures, all of them 100 or better. I believe 101 or better to be exact. When you look at some of his running lines and some of the things that he's done, let's take a look at the Santa Anita Derby. When you break it down incrementally in Formulator, 2396, 2389, 2476, 2441, 1270. You know what? That's pretty darn good. And I think it's probably this sort of running style or fractionally what you're looking for a horse on Saturday afternoon in the Kentucky Derby. The interesting thing for me about Justify, some will argue that, you know, he laid down legitimate fractions, and you see 23, 4, 47, 4, 12, and 3 for 3/4. Over a track that may have been a little bit slow. I'm still going to argue that he got away with murder on the front end, and the Santa Anita Derby didn't teach me a hell of a lot. I may be in the great, vast minority saying that, because they'll say that Bolt Doro, the horse that had every chance and every opportunity to run him down on the far turn, he got flicked away like he was just some ho-hum middle-of-the-road horse. I disagree entirely. I think that the race shape had a lot to do with that, and I don't know what's going to happen on Saturday. The draw tomorrow morning or Tuesday morning, some of you, if you're listening to this live.drf.com or livestream.com or the Racing Form social media pages, you'll already know where Justify is breaking from. At this moment, I don't. But I got to be honest with you. To me, the notion of him going out there, and if he's on the front end, or the horse like Promises Fulfilled, just absolutely giving him hell throughout, boy, he's going to have to be a monster to beat Bolt Doro again with a different pace scenario, and to beat Audible and Magnum Moon and Vino Rosso and Good Magic and all these other horses. There's a lot of things going against this horse. The light foundation, shipping out of California for the first time. Keep in mind, all 3 of his races have come at Santa Anita. He arrived just a few hours ago at Churchill Downs. He looks the picture. Everybody and their brother is out taking photos of him. He might be a monster. Maybe he is going to just absolutely decimate this field, and we could be setting ourselves up for just another phenomenal racehorse coming out from Bob Baffert. At the price that he's going to be, he does nothing for me whatsoever. 5-2, 2-1 does nothing for me in any way, shape, or form. I will be using him. I think you would be crazy not to use him. But at the same time, I wouldn't be leaning heavily on him, because I don't know what's going to happen. Can he sit 3 lengths off of it if he needs to? Can he take kickback? He's never done that really before. At a short price in a 20-horse field, I don't need to get into all the reasons. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. You don't need me to tell you that taking a horse, doing a bunch of things for the first time is not necessarily a great bet, especially at 2-1. Having said that, he is the most likely winner of this race, by far. On speed figures, and it doesn't matter what kind of figures you use, most of them would agree. He's the fastest horse in the race. He is in the best hands with Bob Baffert. He is in arguably the best hands as far as rider is concerned with Mike Smith. And he deserves to be the favorite. Does that mean that I want to bet him? No. I think he is a very likely win candidate. I think he is arguably the most likely winner of the race. But at those sort of odds, I don't have any interest in betting him 2-1, 5-2, but I will have him in everything that I play. As far as Bolt D'Oro is concerned, I don't think he had any chance to win that race with the way that it was run. To me, it was almost as if they were handing it over to him saying, enjoy it now, because we'll be ready to go this coming Saturday afternoon. There'll be a different pace scenario. We'll be able to take off. We'll be able to run the way that we did at Santa Anita in the Derby. But you're going to have some company up front. And if they just push you a little bit, now we get the engine cooking and we can go. I think this horse is a legitimate threat, Bolt D'Oro. I think he's a win contender. I don't know that he's one of the likeliest winners, but I think there's a scenario, and a lot of people have been bringing it up. I believe Chris Larmy was the one that first sort of pointed out the idea of going back to I believe it was the Real Quiet Indian Charlie year. I could be wrong. If I am, I apologize. Where one of them won one race and one of them turned the tables in the other one. Would it be a stunner if that happened here? No, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think Bolt D'Oro has a better chance with a better race shape Saturday afternoon. One other horse that I have to talk about. Myself and Lee Davis, back on December the 1st, Lee was in Las Vegas, and he goes, what are we doing for Derby future? Give me a horse. I said, I like Instilled Regard, a horse for Hollendorfer. He just broken his maiden. He's slow on paper, but he's going to want as much distance as possible. So 10 furlongs, hopefully if we get to that point, not going to be a problem. He's going to have to work on some things a little bit on the green side, but I think he can develop. Well, I think there's a scenario. And yeah, we've got some skin in the game. I will be rooting for him. I don't know that I'm picking him, but I think you can certainly use him underneath as far as exotics are concerned. Here's a crazy, crazy sort of layout, and you really got to be open-minded to believe in this sort of case for a horse like Instilled Regard on Saturday afternoon. Instilled Regard runs a very, very game second in the Los Alamitos Futurity against McKinsey and against Solamini. Now, if you want to say that race hasn't come back as good as it looked back then, that's debatable. But that's neither here nor there. Comes back in his first race down at the fairgrounds, graded stakes race, and wins for fun. Still a little bit on the green side, but wins for fun. Then he comes back in the Risen Star at the fairgrounds. And by all accounts, a disappointing effort. A little bit flat, never really threatened. But when you look at that race, it was an oddly run race where the pace just, no one made up any ground. It was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nobody was doing anything. Then you look and you see some horses come out of that race and run well. A horse like Noble Indy comes back to win the Louisiana Derby. Well, then Instilled Regard goes to the Santa Anita Derby, where he's taking on the two biggest names of his generation, maybe with the exception of Good Magic. And the way that he was ridden and the way that that race played out at Santa Anita, he had zero chance. Then all of a sudden, it sounds like they're not going to run him in this race. And the owner is the one that is pushing more to run this horse on Saturday than Jerry Hollendorfer. But Hollendorfer said after the most recent work, and I like the way that it looked, that it was a fantastic effort. I'm just saying I think there are worse 30-1 shots than Instilled Regard on Saturday. I think he's going to run relatively well. He's far from the likeliest of win candidates. He's not even a likely winner. I think he's got a puncher's chance if the distance really comes into factor. I am going to be using him at the very least underneath, and I have not ruled out picking him just because, for loyalty's sake, and also because I think that what I just laid out, I kind of believe a little bit. So we'll find out. No question about it, though. The two horses that you're going to want to keep an eye on coming out of the Santa Anita Derby, Justify and Bolt D'Oro, and really, all eyes are on one horse. We'll find out if Justify is the next super horse for Bob Baffert. And the final 100-point Derby prep came the 14th day of the month of April. That was the Arkansas Derby down in Hot Springs, Arkansas, Oak Lawn Park. All eyes were on Magnum Moon coming into it. He has done little wrong, very similar, eerily similar, actually, to what we've seen with Justify. Maybe not as brilliant, or actually, you know what? I shouldn't even say that. You can make the case he has been more brilliant than Justify. He just hasn't run as fast on the speed figure scale of things. But he has high-profile connections. You have the Baffert sort of Pletcher angle, one versus the other. You got Luis Saez riding, you got Mike Smith riding. You got forward running styles. There's a lot of similarities. Why do I like one a heck of a lot more than I like the other? First things first, let's take a look at the stretch run. Here's Vic Stauffer with the call of the Arkansas Derby.
Derby and Magnum Moon cuts the corner and leads. Magnum Moon has suddenly opened up a 3.5 length margin. Combatant to the outside of Solimini. Magnum Moon comes to the final 16th, and he's going to be an undefeated Arkansas Derby winner. Get ready, Kentucky. There's a bad moon on the rise.
When I look at Magnum Moon, I kind of see a horse that, in the grand scheme of things, has done nothing wrong on the racetrack. But I don't think he's getting any faster. And I understand he finished very, very well here. We can go into Formulator, and again, I can't stress this enough. I think this is one of the more important things that you can use this tool for. In Formulator, you can go and you pull up incremental fractions. Opening quarter, he moved pretty good. 23.34 to get out there and establish some position. Look at those next 3/4 miles. 25.26, 24.79, 24.48. And he only came home in 11.99, and I say only because everyone else came home just slightly slower than that. With those sort of fractions, you're supposed to kick home in a pretty big way. He's going to have to do something entirely different on Saturday afternoon than what he's accustomed to doing. This is a horse that, generally speaking, he likes to be forward, but he's been forward on soft, sort of cushy setups, and he drifts out really, really badly down the lane. He's always been a little bit quirky as far as the mechanics are concerned. It's always dangerous to doubt a horse that all they do is go out and win. But this might be the kind of horse for me anyway, in my opinion, that I'm just not sold on the company he's been keeping and the way that he's done them. Visually, he looks great, but what happens when you face a tougher pace situation? What happens when you face better horses, when they're not just going to go away the way that these other horses did? Quip is a nice horse. I don't think anyone is saying that he's a bum, but there's a major difference between flicking Quip away and flicking Justify away, or flicking Bolt Doro, or Good Magic, or any of these other big names away. This is just going to be an entirely different ballgame for Magnum Moon on Saturday afternoon. He may be a legitimate horse, and he may be a monster. Who knows? Maybe he's the one that's going to be saying, everybody's got all eyes on Justify with this whole Curse of Apollo nonsense. What about me? Maybe he'll be the one on Saturday to make someone like me shut up and look like an idiot. We'll find out. It wouldn't be the first time. I think Magnum Moon is a very, very talented horse. I just don't know if I love him on Saturday afternoon. I think there will be spots for him going forward. I'm not sure the Kentucky Derby is that spot. Solimini is a horse. I've talked about him quite a bit. I don't know that he's taken the step forward from 2 to 3. I don't know if there's a physical issue. The lead changes have always bothered me. Baffert, after his most recent lead workout, said the lead changes were clear and good, but we need to take him back and just let him relax and make one run, because if he gets rushed, that's when he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. That, to me, is kind of a problem. He may be good enough to run underneath. I have to be honest, I'm probably going to be just taking an entire stand against him, where if he runs in the top 4, I'll lose everything that I've got. But I still have time to tweak that. Combatant is in the body of the field for the Kentucky Derby, and I think that's important because he is the kind of horse that I still think he's better off going shorter, but Steve Asmussen has likened him to looking at Lee, horse that ran second at a giant price last year. I think there is a scenario where if the pace heats up, he could come with a little bit of a run. He doesn't like to win very often, but again, in a race like this, like the Derby, you don't necessarily... Look, everybody loves a good exacta, but this may be the one time of year that you can really get kind of bold and say, let's swing for the fences. Let's throw a few $100s into the superfecta. It's not a likely proposition, but if we connect with a couple of good opinions, we can be set for the year, if not the next 10 years. We'll find out. The Arkansas Derby, I'm a little bit dubious of the Arkansas path to the Kentucky Derby. Having said that, it's hard to argue with a horse that all he does is go out and win as impressively visually as Magnum Moon has. Don't like how he was drifting out the way that he did in this most recent run. Don't like how he was a little bit wonky with the mechanics 2 starts back. But again, he's in very good hands, and he would not be the craziest horse to win the Kentucky Derby for Todd Pletcher. So there you have it. Those are the 100-point Derby preps. Those are all recapped, buttoned up. Everything's good to go. One last thing I will leave you with you anyway to think about this. Those races that we just talked about, if the trend continues over the past 5 years, the winner of the Kentucky Derby exited one of those 100-point races as a winner. So if the trend continues, of those 7 horses, one of them is going to win on Saturday. If the trend continues. Trends usually eventually are broken or shift in a different direction. Maybe this year it changes, or maybe this year it doesn't. If it doesn't, one of those 7 horses that you just saw will be the ones wearing the roses on Saturday afternoon down in Louisville. But we have to acknowledge some of the other prep races that happened this year, because there were other big events and bigger performances that we're not going to get to because they were a little bit farther back, and you saw some of them running some of those other races. So as far as the stakes montage this week is concerned, again, usually in the recap, we'll go back and show you what happened in the weekend prior. This time around, we're going to show you the 50-point Derby preps, as well as a couple of random ones, including the Lexington, which my boy Jack won, springboarding him into the body of the field for the Kentucky Derby coming up on Saturday afternoon. Let's go to the stakes montage.
The lead, then it's a gap of 3 to Machismo, who finds his best ride and may turn in. The leader promises fulfilled, tries to do it every step. Strike Power to the attack one more time. Good Magic has been defeated, then Machismo. Less than a 16th to go. The leader is still Promises Fulfilled, and Promises Fulfilled will spring the upset to win the Fountain of Youth under Irad Ortiz Jr.
He's up on the outside, and then Firenze Fire as the field turns for home. Old Time Revival trying to pull off the upset. Enticed is chasing with determination. Free Drop Billy on the outside, and then Firenze Fire. They're in the final furlong. Enticed lengthening his stride, trying to get to this long shot Old Time Revival, and he collars him at the 16th pole. It will be Enticed, sharp in victory, and wrapped up by Junior Alvarado as they stroll home in the Gotham. Old Time Revival second.
At the top of the stretch, and Bolt Doro moves up alongside of McKinsey, and they're racing tightly. They were brushing in upper stretch. McKinsey fights back underneath Bolt Doro. The San Felipe living up to its billing. A 16th left to go. McKinsey on the inside, and Bolt Doro in a spine-tingling spectacle at the Great Race Place. Bolt Doro, McKinsey, they hit the line. McKinsey beats Bolt Doro in a photo, 6 clear of
away. Swings wide for the drive as they straighten away for home. World of Trouble and Quip on the outside. They're locked in battle. Flame Away racing erratically down to the wire. World of Trouble along the rail, and Quip on the outside. They're still heads apart. Quip is now going the better of the 2, and Flame Away flying on late, getting up for second. World of Trouble, a tearing
3.5 from the lead. Lots of chances top of the stretch. Magnum Moon has taken over the lead. He's 2 lengths in front from Title Ready. Combatant splits horses. Solamini's got to go from there to the outside end. Higher Power, and Magnum Moon comes to the 16th pole, and now he's 3 in front. Combatant and Solamini chase him to the wire. It is Magnum Moon, undefeated and a Rebel winner. Magnum Moon blew him away.
Swings wide for the drive in 5th. 5 lengths away, 4 lengths away. Here's Telekinesis up the inside to challenge and take the lead. Here comes my boy Jack down the outside, and Gravitas fighting on in between those 2. Telekinesis, my boy Jack, come to the front in the closing strides. My boy Jack gets up in the final jump to
win. We have a little bit of a different stakes montage this week on the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. Those were the Derby preps going way back, I believe all the way to the end of January or early February. Here we are. We're at the bitter end. We're a few days away from the Kentucky Derby. You've already seen the 20 horses that look like they're going to be the ones contesting the race. Let's give you a little bit of a look of what to expect on DRF TV coming up this week. Again, on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forums YouTube channel, click that subscribe button. You will have the Friday race of the day, which happens to be the Kentucky Oaks, the 3-year-old fillies, 1 1/8 on the main track. You will have the Saturday DRF race of the day. That is the Kentucky Derby. Mile and a quarter, 3-year-olds down underneath the Twin Spires at Churchill Downs. That will be the race of the day on Saturday. You will have all of the stakes that are run on Friday and Saturday previewed. Again, you can find those where you normally find them. You will have 2 editions out of the gate. You will have a Kentucky Oaks edition as well as a Kentucky Derby edition. You will have 2 editions of the Daily Racing Form Players podcast with Peter Thomas Fornatal and Jonathan Kinchin. You will have Woodbine plays of the day coming up. Just because all eyes are on Derby and Oaks doesn't mean that Woodbine is going to be sleeping. We're going to be doing some good stuff up there with Don Lupel and Jeff Bratt. There will be a preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show coming up on Friday. It will air on Friday. It will probably be uploaded sometime on Thursday, where you will have the Kentucky Oaks as well as the Kentucky Derby previewed in there, as well as a couple of other undercard stakes previews. And then we'll get ready for next week. Next week, we'll have the recap of all things Kentucky Derby, Kentucky Oaks, undercard races, you name it. It will all be on the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show next Tuesday. But again, first things first, let's get to the fun. Friday afternoon, 11 o'clock, you'll have the Players Podcast. Noon, you'll have the Matt Bernier Show, the preview edition, Kentucky Oaks, Kentucky Derby. Then you'll lead into the latest edition out of the gate. We'll get you ready for Oaks and Kentucky Derby, 2 separate out of the gate editions this week. If you've been listening to this live on Tuesday at noon on live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forums Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forums Facebook page, thank you for doing so. If you listen to this podcast, you have YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. If you listen on video.drf.com, tremendous, thank you for doing so. If you do so on YouTube, click the subscribe button and also click that like button. You can do the same thing on iTunes. That helps all of us involved in this thing. If we can get some more thumbs up, that would be tremendous. Again, that's over on YouTube as well as iTunes. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, things that you just want to chat about, head on over to @Bernier_Matt on Twitter. Usually pretty good about responding to some certain things. I feel bad for those of you that are not fans of New England sports this time of year, because it's a good time to be a fan, be back in the area. The Bruins are playing well. The Celtics are playing well. The Sox are playing well. It's kind of a thing up here in New England. Hopefully, knock on wood, everything continues down that direction. And hopefully we pick some winners coming up this week. So, again, thank you if you've been listening to this. Hopefully this can help you with your homework and getting ready for the first Saturday in May. We'll talk again on Friday with the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. We will be talking Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby.